Boa dials are absolutely everywhere today in cycling, from shoes to saddle rolls, but unfortunately, sometimes they break. I'm going to talk you through how to replace the Boa IP1 dials today, but the process is largely the same for their other systems. If you're unsure what your shoes or anything else have, just check out the Boa website. To start, if you open up your packet, you'll find this little T6 Torx key, and that's what we use to remove this dial in the first place. So just back that off, and the whole dial fixture should come off in a oneer. And underneath there, you can see the actual ratchet arrangement underneath. And all we're going to do is pop that out using the tool. Now, if your cable's broken, it'll be easy. You can just pull everything out, and they do occasionally snap. But in my case, where they've just got a little bit mashed up on the spool, you might have to trim it off of the spool. Now, I recommend you do one shoe at a time. Quite often shoes have some kind of weird lacing patterns, so it's good to keep one there as a reference. To start, we're just going to pull out all of the wire. We're going to unthread this here. And the first thing we have to do is trim them down to size. We're going to measure our two cables side by side, and getting your damaged cable, I'm just going to run it along and make sure we get the right length. Now, if you're unsure about the length, err on the side of caution and just go a little bit longer. Making a mark roughly where the cable ends, we're going to cut about an inch further up there. Even though there's no reverse thread on the dial itself, it's worth noting that there is a left and right-handed spool and a left and right-handed dial, so make sure you go with the right one. Helpfully, these are color-coded, with the purple one being the left and the kind of pinky red one being the right. Now this is why it's useful to have your shoe that you haven't taken the cable out of yet, because we can use this as a reference now to make sure we lace them right. Threading it correctly is obviously critical to making sure your shoe actually works in the way that the shoe gods so intended it. So once we've laced our shoe all the way up past the tongue, we're going to feed it inside the Boa dial mount. If your Boa dial mount itself is broken, then good luck. Get in touch with your shoe manufacturer, because this is not a replacement part which is supplied by Boa. Now, actually threading our lace into the spool, this is the only properly fiddly part of the process. And again, it's worth noting that the process is different for the left and right dials. With the left dial, we're going to start threading from the right to the left, and with the right to the opposite. I'm going to feed a length of the wire through the rightmost of these three holes. We're going to pass it back through the second one, leaving a loop behind. It's helpful to leave a big enough loop that you should be able to thread it back through easily in a moment. With the lace on the bottom half of that spool, thread it back through the leftmost hole. What we're looking to do is, with this loop behind, we want to pass the cable in front of the middle portion of the cable and behind the first. Pushing it through, we pull that up, and pull our original length through, cinching everything down nice and tight. Now I've left a long length here just so it's easier to illustrate, but really ideally you want to leave no more than perhaps 1.5 centimeters poking out here. We're just going to trim it down with our snips and just tuck that inside the spool. And now we're going to repeat the process on the opposite side of the spool with the other half of the lace. Once we've got everything looking good and tucked into our spool, we're going to take the serrated edge that runs around the outside of the spool. We're going to flip that round, and grabbing your laces with a finger, we're just going to pull your spool nice and tight inside the holder for the Boa dial, making sure we've got the appropriate dial for the appropriate side. In this case, the purple or left-hand dial. We're going to just pop that onto the holder with our little T6 driver. Going to tighten that into place, dial it up to make sure everything's working. We should have a beautiful working new dial. So I've only fixed my left shoe today. If you have to do your right as well, the process is exactly the same. The only difference being that with your right hand spool, which is your red spool, we're going to thread it from the left hand side first.